Welcome to the Haunted Hangover podcast. I'm Louie, and I'm joined by my man Grimy.
Absolutely. And we are here again with the third installment of the Universal Monsters series, barely making a dent.
The fourth.
I was going to say, do we consider the Dracula to be two or just one? Okay, fourth is all right.
Technically, it's an entire separate production, so I think the filmmakers, if we asked them if they consider that a separate film, they'd probably say yes. So I'd say four, Grimy. Four separate movies. We dedicated we dedicated an entire episode to the Spanish version of Dracula, so fuck it.
All right, so we're giving this the number 4. Okay.
This is getting the wonderful number 4, and like you said, massive dent here. I think we're going to say that every episode. Massive dent. Until we actually make a massive dent and we get to a nice round number, like 10 or something.
Yeah, at that point, we'll just be bored of it.
No, I'm having a blast doing this so far.
Me too, man.
So
this one is a little bit different. Not at all what I expected from the title alone.
In the spectrum of iconic Universal monsters and a cliff, and just kind of not the end of the cliff of that line of where the iconography, I guess, of Universal monsters, I'd say this film, on the lower end, you're not finding Erik the gorilla on the Universal Monsters logo anywhere, I think. Safe bet, never. Right, Grimy?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I was actually trying to think, because NECA, the toy company, is making all these Universal Monsters. I thought it'd be hilarious if they made, like, an Erik the gorilla, and it's just, like, a dupe of fucking King Kong or something.
Yeah, I there's nothing about Erik, and we're going to get into Erik here in a second. I know we're just at the top here.
He's a wild one.
Just throwing out the name, Erik the gorilla. Sounds like a wrestler, honestly.
Yeah, who names their gorilla Erik anyway?
And it's Erik with a K. I want to point that out too. It's Erik with a K. But yeah, there's nothing special looking about Erik the gorilla to make a neck. Like, what would you whenever they make a NECA makes these figures, there's always like Frankenstein gets like a test tube or something. Like they add like little accessories to the character. I can't. Oh no. There is one thing, a bonnet. I guess you could add a bonnet.
There you go, bonnet.
The bonnet. Yeah. But yeah, there's not much you can add. There's nothing that distinguishes Erik the gorilla from a normal gorilla, in all honesty.
Not really.
He's a classic gorilla. But yes, before we dive deeper, let's talk a little bit about the movie we're going to be covering, and that is Murders in the Rue Morgue.
I'm Dr. Miracle, monsieur, madame. And I'm not a sideshow charlatan. So if you expect to witness the usual carnival hocus pocus, just go to the box office and get your money back. I'm not exhibiting a freak, a monstrosity of nature, but a milestone in the development of life.
The title alone, I forget it. I keep wanting to say Mysteries in the Rue Morgue, and I'm like, I know it's murders, but yeah, it just doesn't exactly roll off of the tongue. But yeah, this was a weird watch. I really enjoyed it, though.
And a first-time watch for both of us.
Yeah, totally.
I knew of its existence. I actually own a Bela Lugosi box set. I believe there's 4 or 5 movies. It is right over there. I should have grabbed it to show here in the podcast. But I have like a 5-film set. Nice. And this was one of the movies in the set. But I never saw it. I bought it, I think, for the Black Cat, which we'll be getting into in a future installment of our Universal Monsters coverage here. But I bought it mostly for that one because I had always wanted to see it and never saw it. And for some, I don't know why, I never clicked on Murders in the Rue Morgue. I never sat and watched it. And boy, am I disappointed in myself, because this movie is an outrageous gem.
Dude, it is. Like, I'm the same way. If I wouldn't have been tasked with actually having to watch it, I probably would have never watched it. So I'm glad that we're here,
I've watched it twice within a span of a week. And
nice.
I think I enjoyed it the second time around even more. Now, when comparing this film to the previous installments we covered, which was Dracula and Frankenstein, I'd say It sort of follows the same format. Mad scientist, sort of. Creature, sort of. And the creature's obsessed with a woman, sort of. All kind of the same story beats. You've got your, your evil antagonist. You've got your handsome protagonist, and then the damsel in distress. It is interesting how all the movies like the monster always has to chase after a pretty woman, and
always a female,
always. And there's always like a stud guy, like the stud fiance who has to save the day. It's so interesting that in the early 30s, that was like every producer, and these films were produced by the same guy at this point, but they basically go in the room, and when they pitch this idea, they're like, all right, we have this narrative, but the monster, whatever it is, needs to be obsessed with the woman, and that is the overall story arc of this character. It's so even Frankenstein, he goes after the girl, like when we just covered it. So I think it's hilarious that's just kind of what these movies are up until this point. And I know we're 3 movies in, 4 if you want to count the Spanish one, like we just said, but that's literally all they are. And I honestly think it's going to be a couple films before that changes.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems to be that's going to be like a continuing thing from here on out. At some point, maybe stopping in a couple of different ones, but
And if you look at it, that's what horror films, and even when you go into the slasher territory, that's what they are. Very different times, So women were, looked at very differently. They're just kind of there to be objectified, pretty, and to follow the footsteps of their men.
Them and their little bonnets.
Yes, their bonnets. The bonnets, that's all they want. That's all they care about. But yeah, Murders in the Rue Morgue, released February 21st, 1932, Grimy. We're going to a new year. Compared to the last 3 films, all were released within the same calendar year. It was directed by Robert Florey, I believe is how you pronounce this guy's name.
I would say so.
Or Florey. Based on the Edgar Allan Poe story of the same name from 1841, but did a little research because I will be honest, I've never read the Edgar Allan Poe story. It's quite different. I think the only similarities between the two is they both involve a murderous monkey.
That's as far as I read. Everyone said loosely based, so
I think
it might not be very accurate.
I think the original story is more of a detective.
Yeah, and it was supposedly the first detective novel or something like that. I read something to that extent,
and it's kind of
cool.
Yeah, which is cool, and it's kind of like a Shyamalama Ding Dong, M. Night Shyamalan twist ending before that was a thing. Because I believe the whole ending was this detective is looking into why these women are being murdered, and the twist ending is that it's an ape. Yeah. And it was a monkey the entire time that did it. So I guess that was the whole whoa, the monkey is the person behind these murders. So I guess they liked that ending and that kind of antagonist in the film. And they wanted to use that. And that's kind of the only thing, because I don't believe the Bela Lugosi character, that character is in the original. And neither is Pierre or any of the other characters. None of them are in that original book where the orangutan is what everyone remembers the story for. Basically the monkey.
Okay.
From what I read. Sense. Remember, did not read the original novel. I might have to one day. Now I'm curious after watching this movie twice within a couple days span. Like I said, it stars Bela Lugosi, the man, the one of
the myth, the legend.
Yeah, the legend, one of the many legends of the Universal Monsters. We gushed about him in the Dracula episode. Go back and listen to that one if you didn't. He plays Dr., which I thought was a funny name. So basically it's Dr. Miracle, but they pronounce it Miracle.
Miracle with a K.
With a K.
Not a C.
Literally, they must have been like, what should we name this character? Miracle with a K. So, Miracle. typical mad
Creative.
scientist. I want to get into him a little later because I love his look. The other, damsel in distress, Sydney Fox as the, and we teased it, bonnet-obsessed Camille, or Mademoiselle Camille in the movie, because this is a French film, or not French film, but takes place in France.
Right.
We've also got Leon Ames as the pencil-thin, stash-wearing stud, Pierre I believe it's, I am going to butcher these French last names. I don't even want to say them. I avoided Camille's because I was not going to pronounce that right.
You went over that one really quick.
Yes,
I'm going to say it's, we could just call him Dupin. Is that cool?
I think in the movie they say Pierre Dupois or Dupin.
I was going to say Dupin.
Dupin, yes.
If it was, real French or whatever, it would be Dupin.
For the sake of this episode, he is just going to be Pierre. That's it.
Pierre.
And we've got, I like it too. So we've got Camille and Pierre. We're axing their last names for the sanity of me having to say it a couple times in this episode.
Appreciated.
Yes. And Burt Roach as Paul. Now, there's one name, and I wanna focus on him a little bit here because, and we're going to get back to Bela Lugosi because he's also a big highlight for me, at least in this movie. And I'm sure for you too, Grimy. Mm-hmm. But you've got Charles Gamora as Erik the Gorilla, who we talked about before. Now, watching the movie, I was so curious. I was like, this gorilla role, it's very prominent. Like, you see him a bunch of times in the movie, and it's obviously a man in a suit. So while going on Wikipedia, IMDb, all that good stuff, I was doing a little research. And this actor, Charles Gamora, was known for portraying gorillas in movies.
In suits.
Yes, several times. He was also a makeup artist, and he worked with the Marx Brothers, Lon Chaney, Abbott and Costello. So he was really prominent and was known for portraying a gorilla.
Right.
I thought that was
Universal's
so
gorilla guy, huh?
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting. I was like, wow, what a career to portray just a man in a gorilla suit. Like, that was his job. And apparently he was a shorter guy. He was 5'4", which helped
pretty short.
But it helped with being this animal, being a monkey, being a gorilla, being an orangutan, whatever, an ape. It helped just his height. And he actually studied apes at the zoo in San Diego. So he was like full-on, full-blown. Charles Gamora went into like becoming a monkey. Like method. Real
method acting.
Yes. Yeah. Method with portraying
so sitting
a monkey.
At his house right now. He's probably gone now, but if he was alive still, he'd probably be sitting at his house eating bananas and stuff.
I'm assuming like he
on
would
his chest.
Study the motions of a gorilla, the emotion, the way the mannerisms of a gorilla. I thought that was really interesting because when you look at movies now, like these new Planet of the Apes movies and the King Kong, these actors that portray them, some of them, not all of them. I believe it's Andy Serkis is the actor who portrayed Gollum in Lord of the Rings and Kong in the King Kong Peter Jackson movie. And I think he was Caesar in the Planet of the Apes movies. I'm pretty sure. I might be wrong on that because I'm not huge. I wouldn't call myself the massive Planet of the Apes, the new Planet of the Apes films that came out in the last decade. Like they study monkeys and the way they act and the way they. And I'm like, wow, this guy predates that. He's kind of like the monkey man. Like he was the girl. Like he's the epitome of actors that their whole life or most of their career was portraying apes. I thought that was really interesting. I dug that little tidbit of information. And one other thing I didn't even know personally, and it makes sense, but in the 30s and 40s, on screen, people were terrified of apes. And like it was a thing. People were scared of gorillas and like large apes. So
really?
When I was reading, his career started to dwindle in the 50s and 60s because people weren't as scared of monkeys, gorillas, apes. People were just like, oh, it's a fucking monkey. I can see it at the zoo. Mm-hmm. And he would go on to do other things because no one needed a man in a gorilla suit anymore. So really interesting. I had never heard this name, and I was so curious to see him credited as Erik the Gorilla. So I had to just take a look, and it was a pleasant surprise. I almost want to watch some other films that he starred in as a monkey. So I gotta watch these, like the Lon Chaney film, the Marx Brothers movie where he portrays an ape. It's very interesting. Cool.
I can see it right now.
backstory.
After we get through all this Universal monster stuff, it's going to be us watching monkey movies, just monkey movies exclusively. I'm here for it.
Charles Gamora's filmography. We're gonna
Oh,
every time he played a gorilla, we're gonna just talk about all the movies. Yeah, I'm very curious if it was like different types of monkeys too, like a gorilla in this film, an orangutan in this one, a chimpanzee in this one. Just interesting career this man had when it comes to monkeys portraying this animal. You
Yeah.
don't see it anymore. I don't think that's a
No,
thing
not
anymore.
really.
Gotta bring it
The
back.
genre has been lost.
The man
So
in a gorilla
I,
suit has been lost on Hollywood.
I think the last one was in Batman and Robin with what was it? Bane. Bane was inside of the gorilla suit at one point in time with Poison Ivy. Yeah.
Oh yes, you're right.
No,
Yes.
Poison Ivy was in the gorilla suit.
Yes,
so,
yes,
yeah.
you're right. She was dressed up as a monkey when they were like trying to trick everyone. I forget the scene. It's been a while since I watched the Uma Thurman Poison Ivy.
A modern day
Batman and
Charles, you know.
Yes, modern day Charles Gamora.
But anyway, so I read a whole bunch of stuff about Lugosi and Flore in this instance here. So this film was produced for them because they were dropped from Frankenstein. Originally, they wanted Lugosi to play Dr. Frankenstein, and Flore was supposed to produce it or direct it or something.
I think he was supposed to direct
And-
it. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then later they were like, no, we're not going to have you do that. We're actually going to have you play the monster. And he didn't want to do that, never gave a reason, and opted out of it completely. And as you can tell, Flore was replaced with James Whale. And this is all happening within the year of his absolutely iconic performance in Dracula. And that just kind of blows my mind that because he's a mad scientist in this film, so more or less this is probably what we would have gotten for him in as Dr. Frankenstein. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I'm sure when they looked back at it, I'm sure Bela Lugosi was
probably
like,
like, yeah.
fuck,
Yeah.
man. I got the monkey movie, not the creature, the iconic, now iconic Frankenstein, Boris Karloff. So it is. And I think what I was reading online was that Robert Flore was not happy with the end product of Murders in the Rue Morgue. Like I think he wanted to be a little more accurate to the novel, to the short story. And
okay.
the studio was like, no, we have to make it contemporary. We need to have, like you said, they introduced the character, the Bela Lugosi Dr. Miracle character. They made it more, I guess, looking back at it, it's more Universal Monster-esque than the original story. And
sure.
he kind of not disowned it because obviously his name's on it, but never really wanted to talk about it after the fact.
Right.
He was kind of embarrassed to be known for like the Universal produced Murders in the Rue Morgue, and he didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't hear anything bad from at least the research I did. I didn't ever find anything where Bela Lugosi was upset about being in Murders in the Rue Morgue. So I'm guessing he enjoyed it. Like it was a good paycheck for him, and he was able to kind of continue on,
Oh yeah.
in these movies that are being produced through Universal. So that is interesting. And I even think if I remember correctly, the director of the Spanish language Dracula was the original choice to direct this.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and then Robert came in and ended up directing it. But yeah, it's interesting how when you look at such a short amount of time these movies were produced in. Like they were like just popping them out. Like,
Popping them out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it does seem that way, which is pretty fascinating. It's quick.
yeah, it's kind of crazy too because they made it. They're making 2 or 3 of these a year, and then they're using the same actors. So it's like they must have been doing like pre-production on one movie while that one's being edited, pre-production on the next one, and they're like, all right, we can use Boris Karloff again, we can use Bela again. And it's really these guys that they bounced back. It's so interesting. They bounced back and forth between productions. It was like, all right, they must have worked cheap. It must have just been like, obviously good money for the time, but it's just, I find that, like, it's like literally went from Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, back to Bela Lugosi. It's like, it's kind of crazy that these guys, their entire career were built on these monster movies, mad scientists, creatures, etc. Just interesting careers, man.
Have you written any papers?
None to be shown.
I had hoped you'd let me come to see you. Have you a house in Paris?
No. I sleep here. This tent is my home.
So while they were shooting it, Frankenstein was released, was a massive hit. So they were able to get more money together, go back and reshoot and add additional scenes to Murders in the Rue Morgue. So this movie literally was, I guess, they were obviously gambling on it. They were just making it, weren't probably thinking much about it until they saw, okay, Frankenstein was such a big deal. Let's put a little bit more money into this film to make it better. So like here's something funny. We're going to go back to Erik the gorilla. All the shots, which is fucking hysterical. All the shots of Erik in close-up that are like the chimpanzee, the real chimpanzee.
The real chimpanzee, yeah.
Those were reshoots.
Oh, no shit.
So they went to a zoo, and shot those scenes.
That's crazy. Yeah, I was like, I don't know, just because I kind of love this kind of thing where I can sit, eat popcorn, and giggle about stuff.
Yeah.
But like the whole Erik thing is like, I swear there was like a gorilla, a chimpanzee, and then like a suit which had like, I don't know if it actually did, but it had to have had 2 or 3 different faces or head sculpts or whatever, because there's just different expressions, and you're just like, that's clearly not the same thing. And then you see the chimpanzee, you're like, this isn't even the same fucking monkey. It's not even like
it's a different
gorilla.
animal.
It's a chimpanzee. What the? Oh, yeah, they just put a zebra in there.
Yeah, it is odd because you're right. Like the two don't, continuity wise, it doesn't match. Yeah. But I think, audience members were quite different, I'm sure, in 1932.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
They probably didn't notice it. They were like, oh, that's a gorilla. Like, that's not a chimpanzee. Yeah. That's fucking Michael Jackson's Bubbles, not King Kong, And this movie, I'm assuming, King Kong must have been, because I think King Kong was either around or around the same time, so there must have been some sort of correlation between the two, and like a gorilla and a woman, a gorilla being obsessed with a woman. But yeah, those chimpanzee close-up shots of Erik were all reshoots. The scene, and when we get into the plot breakdown here, but the scene with the prostitute and the two guys in the knife fight, I believe, was also added into the film. So like they wanted to go in and add more, I guess, horror to the movie.
Right.
So,
okay, yeah, kind of edge it up a bit.
Yeah, like that was the point of these reshoots, and that was all because of the success of Frankenstein at the time. So,
I'm kidding.
I'm sure after the fact, they were probably like, oh man, this movie and Frankenstein, quite different.
Yeah, it's crazy. I also read that there was supposed to be a lot more footage to this movie, so it's only like an hour long or something, give or take a few minutes, but originally it was supposed to be 80 minutes long or something like that, and they clipped all kinds of stuff that they deemed was just too risky to put out on film at the time. So it was maybe a little bit more brutal than we had gotten.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm curious what if that was reshot and put in there just to be scrapped.
I'm sure, because I'm, even thinking about Frankenstein and Dracula up until this point, there's no real stabbing of anyone. This is like the first time legitimately you don't see penetration, but you see
you get the idea.
Yeah, like they're stabbing and
throwing knives at each other and shit.
Yeah, in Dracula we never saw Van Helsing stake Dracula. We only heard it. So in this one, there's two dudes legitimately having a knife battle, like there's a fight, you know, and then we see a corpse in this one, which we'll get into. So, you know, you see a dead body, you see it kind of in sort of a graphic way, and I very air quotey, a graphic way, but yeah, I could see why this might have been a lot of violence towards women and putting women down. I could see where this was a little more edgy, like you said, edgier for the time compared to the three previous films in this franchise.
Let me close the door. I'll call for help.
But I have a message for you from Erik. He talks only of you. Can't forget you. There is something you must know.
So, film takes place Paris, France, and follows a medical student, Pierre, and his fiancée Camille. No last names. we meet Dr. Miracle at his sideshow exhibit. So it's like one of those freak show, like join and come up whatever.
Yeah,
come up
like a
and
carnival
watch
kind of thing.
This creature or this person, one of those situations where there's an exhibit that features our boy, Erik the Gorilla. After the presentation, Dr. Miracle invites Pierre, Camille, and their friends for an up-close look at Erik. Here, Erik snatches Camille's bonnet from her head and attacks Pierre by choking him, which is an unintentionally hilarious scene because Pierre's getting choked and he's just like, and like the monkey's just like shaking him. I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, this is kind of goofy looking, but I'm sure at the time people were probably fucking screaming at the scene.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Miracle forces Erik to let go of Pierre, and he apologizes to the couple, and he offers to buy Camille a new bonnet, and he basically asked her for her address. He wants her address. Hey, I'll order you a new bonnet. Erik is not going to let go of the bonnet. He's sitting in there in his cage holding this bonnet.
It's his bonnet now.
It's his bonnet now. So we later learn that Dr. Miracle is running these experiments which involve extracting human blood specifically from women, which is never quite explained. It's just he wants human blood. It has to be from a woman. And his plan is to inject it into Erik. Now, maybe I missed it. Is it to turn Erik more human-like? I think that's...
No. So
okay.
It's very confusing because I had to read up on it too. So what they're doing is they're taking Erik's blood, injecting it into the women so that basically they'll want to fuck Erik.
Okay. And create like hybrid human ape?
Because the whole time, this Dr. Miracle, he's like very hell-bent on, you know, showing this evolution between apes and humans. And this is his way to make a kinship between them and prove his theories and this and that. And yeah, man, it's off the walls, very basket case kind of thing. But that's from what I'm understanding. I've read 3 different things online saying the exact same thing, and I'm just like, wow, that's
without saying it. Basically, he wants the monkey to bang women. That's basically so.
Pretty much.
So he's using the blood he's injecting the blood into both. But he needs also the perfect blood. It needs to be blood that's pure.
Yep, it's got to be from a virgin or something.
Yeah, so he can't inject the blood into Erik until he finds the perfect specimen.
That's it, yeah.
And in this, in him looking for this blood, we do see him abduct a prostitute and basically takes her blood, looks it up, and the blood is no good. He doesn't want this blood. She's a hooker.
He's no bueno. It's dirty.
no bueno. Not good. Hooker blood is gross. Apparently, he is very upset too when he Bela Lugosi's reaction. He's like, "Oh, you pig!" Basically, in a nutshell, like
Yeah, pretty much.
Your blood, your beauty. He has a great line, which I have a couple of lines here that he says, and I want to when we talk a little bit more about him, I'll spout them out. But he is just disgusted by this woman's blood. I have never like this predates HIV. So I want to know what's in this woman's blood that is so disgusting and rotten. Like,
oh, dude, and he's so disappointed. Like, so they're hanging from this X cross thing, you know, by their arms, and as soon as he's like, "Yep, it's gross, it's no good, she's dead," and he just like cuts her bandages, and they just fall into this pit. That's it.
She's just like a waste at that point in his eyes.
Like, holy shit, little brash, isn't it?
Committed murder, abducted a woman, and she's the bad guy in this situation, according to to Morocco. She's horrible. But yes, prostitution, murder happens in this movie. So Pierre, back to Pierre, starts to investigate this mysterious prostitute's death. He goes to the morgue. He starts requesting, blood of hers, and he starts doing this research, and he's experimenting on the blood, and he ends up discovering that this said blood's the prostitute's blood has a foreign poison or substance in it.
Yeah. So there's some unknown substance.
Yeah.
They didn't, for some reason, see this weird like arm thing. He like is looking, is like, is there anything wrong with this person? And they're like, no, everything checks out. And he's like, what's this on the arm? And it's like this weird boil kind of thing. And he's like, oh shit, yeah, there's the boil. And so he's like trying to figure out, he's going through books, all these different things, and finally lands on it, and it's the blood of an ape.
Yeah.
So, and then he like puts the two things together.
Pierre's obsessed with this prostitute's blood and the abnormality in it. Like, he just wants to get down to it. He becomes a detective at this point. Even though he's a medical student, he shouldn't, like, this is not his line of work, but he wants to know what the hell's going on with the blood and the prostitute. Also, there's kind of like a subplot in this film involving the Rue Morgue, because it is in the title, where Pierre goes to the morgue. The morgue pops up several times whenever bodies are brought in, and there's this kind of really thin, odd-looking, I guess, coroner, I don't know what the position is, that they kind of brush off everyone's death. It's like they bring the body in, and it's like, oh, what's the subject's name? 20s, 30s. What did they die from? Oh, poisoning, drowning. And they're just kind of like, ha, ha, ha. Like, they laugh at these people's demise. It's interesting. It constantly goes back because Pierre interacts with this gentleman. We see when the prostitute's body's brought into the morgue. And then the ending, there's like, when we get to it in a second, that's where the movie ends, in the morgue. So they do put a lot of focus on this character and the morgue because it's in the title, Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Right.
So what ends up happening in the rest of the film? So Dr. Morocco confronts Camille, requesting, forcefully, I might add, that she visit Erik. He shows up after, she gets a new bonnet from him and all this stuff. So he's trying to butter up Camille, but she refuses. She wants nothing to do with Erik. She's kind of creeped out. She has every right to be, because Morocco's like in the doorway trying to force his way in. He's like, no, you must see my monkey. I want you to see. He really wants her to see his monkey. And he ends up summoning Erik, who's like sitting in the carriage outside of the apartment building, I guess, or the building.
Yeah.
And he proceeds to kidnap Camille and murder her mother. Savage fucking gorilla.
He's savage, man. Yeah, he's crazy, off the hinges.
And he's got his own motive, and we learn about that at the end, which we're getting to here. So Pierre tries to explain to the officers that Camille was kidnapped by Dr. Morocco and Erik, but they don't believe him. They're like, why would this dude who has a monkey Why would he kidnap her? You're crazy. You sound like a nut job. And they don't believe that the monkey is the assailant. Like, they don't think that this gorilla...
No, they actually want to put him in jail.
Yeah,
They're like,
they
you know
arrest
a
him.
lot, so
Yeah.
we're going to put you in jail. Like, what the fuck? Is that really how this works?
And because this is a movie, a random, like, officer or something opens up the chimney, and they discover the body of Camille's mother there, hanging upside down, like a little bloody. It's obviously like a dummy or something that they have hung.
Yeah.
And they all scream in fear, and they're grossed out. They're like, oh my God, what is this? And then Pierre notices that there's gorilla fur in her hand, and he shows the detective and he shows the officers, look, I told you, it's a
This
gorilla.
isn't human hair. This is gorilla hair right here, sir.
Kinda
He's like,
big.
oh, wow.
Big lump of gorilla pubes in her hand,
Yeah.
and he just is like, "Here you go. Look, this is who killed the mother and kidnapped Camille." So Pierre and the mob, they head over to Morocco's lair, his lab, and we cut back to Morocco, he's examining Camille. He looks up her blood, and it's the most perfect blood. He's all turned on and excited. He goes up over to her and creepily, she's sedated, by the way, starts to like cop a feel and start to touch her as the mob is approaching his lab. And the mob shows up, and what ends up happening? Erik, as Dr. Morocco's trying to inject Erik with Camille's blood,
Oh, yeah.
no surprise here, Erik turns on Dr. Morocco, strangles him, and kills him. He ends up
A twist.
A twist. He turns. I was not expecting that. Oh my God.
I wasn't either, to be honest. I
You
was
did?
like, wow, this happened, huh?
I was like, Erik is 100% turning heel on Dr. Morocco. There's going to
And
be a turn there.
I feel like I should have anticipated this.
Yeah.
Like, I should have known this was happening. But for some reason, it just didn't feel like... It wasn't predictable, you know what I mean? Like, it happened, and it caught me by surprise. Very strange.
It's almost like, in reality, Dr. Morocco was just being used by Erik the entire... So basically, the monkey was outsmarted him. That's what they were trying to say. It's like the monkey led him on, brought the girl he wanted, and then at that point, I don't know what Eric's plan was. He was just gonna run away with Camille, because there's no real... You never get any sense of what Erik the gorilla wanted to do. He just wanted her. That's it. He wanted to bang her. I guess.
I guess.
That's
perfect
basically it. So what happens? Erik grabs Camille and he begins to climb the rooftops of Paris. Very King Kong.
Epic.
King
It
Kong.
was so cool.
Yeah, King Kong, obviously he's much smaller, but he's got this, he's got her under his arm. He's climbing to the rooftops. He's swinging around different buildings, running around. The mob is chasing them, trying to get Camille. One cop tries to shoot Camille, and Pierre's like, what are you doing? He's going to drop her and kill her. Yeah, so what ends up happening is Pierre grabs one of the officer's guns. He climbs the roof. He confronts Erik, who like kind of throws Camille off to the side. All Erik does is raises his arms above his head and I guess tries to approach Pierre. And then Pierre just like busts a cap in him. Like he just shoots him.
Just blew him away.
Yeah. And Erik rolls over dead, falls into a body of water below, and the film ends, which it's kind of funny because like it's kind of a cliffhanger. It's like he gets shot. Erik falls over.
Is he dead?
Yeah, is he dead? We never like.
I was wondering that too. Like, is there another one coming that we don't know about, or what?
I was expecting like if this movie was made in like the 80s, 90s, 2000s, like even contemporary times, there'd be one final shot of like a gorilla hand coming out of the water, like sequel bait.
Yep.
But yeah, the film ends with like Camille, Pierre embracing, and we cut back to the morgue where Morocco's body's been taken. And they kind of like make a joke of Morocco's death, like his death. They're like, age doesn't matter. Kind of just like, fuck this guy. Death, way of death or whatever. How did he die? Murdered by an ape. And they all like chuckle. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
Kind of making fun of the entire plot of this movie, in a sense. It's like, he was killed by a monkey, that idiot. And in a nutshell, that was Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Oh, I can tell you who committed the murder and where you can find him.
Who? An ape.
What were your initial thoughts on just like when it was all said and done? What did you think about this killer gorilla movie?
So before we get to that, I had a lot of ideas of what this might have been, and I really thought it was going to be like a Jack the Ripper kind of story. Like it felt set up that way, and I was like, okay, so they're like getting hookers and stuff, and kind of murdering them, I guess. And like I really don't know what's happening here, but. Just the way that they portray Jack the Ripper in a lot of things, I was like, I see it here. The top hat and the fucking cloak or whatever. And totally not that at all. Something much weirder. Yeah, I mean, I was blown away. I can't believe I've never heard of this movie before, or that more people aren't actively talking about it. I know that it wasn't a box office success, obviously, back in the day, but like, seemed like it's found its place now, as far as I've read. Like a lot of people give it really, really good reviews. I gave it a good review. I mean, I think it's fucking awesome. It's a bonkers ass concept, but like it's entertaining, And like I said before, it's one of them things I like to sit, watch interesting things, eat popcorn and giggle at them. This has all of that.
Yeah, it's funny because it's in the order of at least the way we're kind of going through these movies. It's crazy to think that Frankenstein was the movie that came out before this because they are so different.
Completely different. Like
the direction.
And I dare to even
different.
say that this is like I feel like, is this really a Universal Monsters flick? Like, can you honestly say Universal Monster? But like the heart is there. I feel like it's there. I don't know if I would consider Erik being like on par with Frankenstein necessarily, but it's close.
it's funny because and we joked about it in the beginning, whenever you see anyone talk about Universal Monsters or you go to like Universal Studios, it's always the same, Dracula, Frankenstein, Creature, Bride, Invisible Man. And and when we started this, I knew we were going to hit films that people don't think about at all when they're kind of like, oh, I want to watch a Universal Monster movie. I'm going to watch Bride of Frankenstein. No one's like, I'm going to watch Murders in the Rue Morgue, because it's just nothing about this movie is what you think of. And this kind of goes back to what you said. Nothing about this movie is what you think of when you think of the Universal Monsters like brand.
Yeah.
This
absolutely.
Besides Bela Lugosi and, like we joked, a woman in peril from like a creature, it kind of veers away from even like the lab stuff isn't what you would think of. It's like this little creepy box that Dr. Maracle is in. And
it's no elaborate thing in like a big castle. It's just like in someone's kind of basement or like an attic kind of thing. And it's different, so much different than all the other ones. But let me tell you what. I have a Universal Monsters Pepsi poster right here, and I feel like it could probably use some Erik in there.
Erik the gorilla
bopping around. Yeah, man. Could you imagine if like Pepsi
amazing.
had fucking Erik on all of their Pepsi bottles back in the day? That'd be hilarious.
All they have to do is like have him hold a Pepsi wearing sunglasses and like the Universal logo on it with like all the characters like on the Pepsi. And it's just like, Erik the gorilla holding a Pepsi or something. It would be spot on branding.
That sunglasses are like the Creature's sideways red hat. He could probably borrow that from him a couple of times. Like,
not enough love for Erik the gorilla, man. There's just not enough love for him.
Not at all.
And they really focus, and it's, and I want to talk about Bela Lugosi because we didn't even get into like his look and his overall performance and some stuff he did, but he is, I'd say, when you think of this movie and you read about it, you're like, he's the monster. He's more of the Dr. Frankenstein. But I think when you look this movie up, since it's Bela Lugosi, he's front and center. Even when you look at the poster for it, it's his face. The monkey's this big. It's not, it's not, Erik's not the focal point of it. It's really Bela Lugosi, because I'm assuming they were trying to capitalize on the success of Dracula and that movie being what it was at the time. It's like, all right, you know him from Dracula. Now see him in the Murders of the Rue Morgue. And I will be very honest. The character of Dr. Miracle is it's Bela Lugosi. with his Hungarian
Yeah,
accent.
dude. Yep.
I would say when it comes to judging his performance, it's not as subdued as Dracula, where in Dracula there's moments of him being quiet and sinister and just using his eyes and his, those
A lot of still
shots when we covered the movie are fucking beautiful. In this, he's more of just like this eccentric, very much a predator. He is kind of creepy at times.
Yeah. Agreed.
Mad scientist. That's it. And his look, which we should just highlight right now. He's got this giant bushy ass unibrow. This crazy
kind of like
curly hair.
Like a ringmastery kind of
Yes.
look almost. Like you expect him to be at like a carnival doing these sideshow things and not necessarily thinking of him as like a scientist until he's there. And it's like, okay, this kind of makes sense, I guess. Like he's a jack of all trades, I guess. I don't know.
Which I think the point of the movie was that he's using the sideshow, Erik the gorilla
The bit.
as exhibit as a front for his experiments. So that's why he probably's got the big, crazy hair. He's even got like swoopy like sideburns that kind of look like they connect to his unibrow. And he looks really pale. Like you can tell they put some like foundation to kind of pale him out. It's to me at least it's a unique look, and I wouldn't say a drastic departure from the portrayal of Frankenstein, of Dracula, but
Dracula,
in line with what he did there, but not as intimidating. He's more of just a human in this movie instead of like the supernatural being, which I dig.
Yeah,
and there's no
absolutely.
denying that accent. That shit's not going anywhere. There's no Bela Lugosi. I don't think was able to any performance he's in, even going forward, because he is gonna pop up again. That is the sound of Bela Lugosi permanently. There's no hiding it, no matter what movie he's in.
Your blood is rotten, black as your sins. You cheated me. Your beauty was a lie.
I also love all the shots of him. So like there's these shots of him with the big furry hat. I think you said his hat earlier, the big round furry hat that he has where he's in the shadows. Very reminiscent of some shots of him as Dracula with these heavy shadows behind him on the wall. And just kind of, and I think where he really shines in the movie is that scene where he confronts Camille trying to convince her to go outside and meet with Erik. Like that's where he really comes off as like she's the prey, he's the predator. She needs to, be his I guess experiment or take part in his experiment no matter what. And he does look pretty creepy in those shots.
Oh yeah, menacing, desperate.
Yeah.
He was really working her, trying to get her to come down, and you could feel it. It was good, man. I really liked his overall, just I don't know.
Demeanor.
How do I want to say
his
that?
demeanor,
Yeah,
I guess, throughout the movie.
basically.
He's got that.
Yeah, he played it good.
He's got those. I'd say it's a 2-scene performance. It's the scene where he's trying to convince Camille to go see Erik so he can steal her blood, and then the scene with the prostitute where your beauty was a lie. He says, he's saying it to himself, and he's really disappointed in the prostitute's blood. Like those two scenes are really probably where like Bela Lugosi went all in with the character of Dr. Morocco. Like he just was on point with those two scenes. Another character that I didn't even mention in the synopsis, that's kind of more of a supporting role, and I'm curious where you stand with this character. And I thought it was he's the comedy relief in the movie. When I went down the cast there briefly at the top, Burt Roach is Paul. He's Pierre's kind of like lovable, chubby best friend, roommate, college roommate, I guess. And that scene with him and Pierre in their apartment where Pierre's obsessed with testing the blood and finding out what that, abnormal substance is in the blood of the prostitute, where he's making noodles and he's just complaining to Pierre, and Pierre's ignoring him. He's almost like a nagging wife or partner, if you notice. Like he's
kind of. Yeah, it feels like maybe it landed a little bit better back then.
Yeah. You'd think they're a
nowadays
couple
it's
now.
kind of yeah, it's a little awkward. It gets muddled in the middle there, but yeah, I could kind of see what they were going for with it.
He's like, you're a vampire, a vulture, and Pierre's just ignoring him. But he just comes
Yeah.
off as like his boyfriend at that point. I was like,
Pretty much.
interesting kind of choice. But like you said, I guess that's just lost in translation between, I guess, the way
Yeah.
people were then and now.
Sure.
And then even
I got
how-
a lot of
yeah.
weird, like, so the prostitute scene where you see the two men stabbing each other, and I was like so confused in that whole sequence because at points the girl is screaming, crying, but then she's like laughing too.
Yeah.
And like when he's, asking her to come into his carriage or whatever with his horse-drawn carriage, she's like kind of like, I don't know, you can tell she's kind of creeped out, but she's also giggling and laughing, and like all this just happened. She was frightened, and he's just trying to get you to come into his carriage, and now it's okay. That was one thing that I was like, I don't really know what's going on here. I hope this isn't going to be like a reflection of what's yet to come.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't.
Like I said earlier, they added that scene in. I'm pretty sure the duel scene, which is that scene,
Right,
was added
right.
in. So I'm assuming that's why it feels a little out of place.
Misplaced, yeah.
So that's probably why, just in general, that scene seems a
Mm-hmm.
little kind of cut and paste. Like, okay, this is a little odd. Seeing
It really
this
does.
like entire fight between these two dudes, and then
Yeah.
her just
Makes
reaction.
a lot more sense now.
Yeah. So, that's probably why it comes off a little awkward. Another thing that I think just with the times, a lot of misogyny. So there's that scene really
man,
early
yeah.
on. Yeah, really early on where they're looking at the belly dancer. And Pierre and Paul are all googly for her. They're like, "Oh, can you do that dance for me?" And
Learn that from me, sweetheart.
Yes. And then Paul
She's
gets
like,
smacked.
"Fuck you."
Yeah, he gets smacked, and then Pierre even jokes with Camille, like, "Oh,
Yeah.
would you want me to go test her out or something?" Or like, I forget what she says, but she tells him something. He's like, "Oh, would you like me to hop up there and check for you?" And then he gets hit too. I'm like, God
Yeah.
damn, a lot of misogyny and being smacked. 1932.
Yeah.
I guess what a time. I guess
Apparently.
guys got away with some crazy shit and they were getting smacked for it.
Yeah, I made a little note about this too. I was surprised to see that right away in here. Like these, all these belly dancers are probably 5 or 6 of them in there. I was like, it's weird because this was sexier than what I was made to believe was going to be in this the second Dracula film.
It is like way, you're right. Like even the movie, I feel like this movie has a little more when comparing the sexiness level.
Yeah,
A lot
yeah.
more in this one. Again,
Yeah.
like you said earlier, the edginess, I guess the success from the previous two films. There was no sexiness in Frankenstein. Zero.
No, none.
There's a little bit here. There's a little bit. The belly dancers, even Camille at times, sprawled out unconscious while, Maracle like kind of is caressing her all creepily. Just there's something about it where it's like women, the prostitute. Like there's just something about like women being used more, again, objective, like they're just more objects and just
Yeah.
kind of misogyny. It's just weird times. But that, we're gonna continue to see that in the rest of these movies. That's not going away anytime soon because of the time,
sure.
the time these movies were made. One last thing I want to talk about here that I thought was fucking hysterical, and it's just another odd scene, is and I think this was supposed to be comedy, but the weird scene with the detective before Pierre comes in and all the eyewitnesses to Camille's kidnapping and her mother being killed, but they don't know it yet. They don't know that the mother was killed, but Camille's kidnapping. There's those 3 dudes. There's a German, a Dutchman, and I think an Italian. And earlier in the movie, Morocco can speak the tongue of Erik the gorilla, so he can communicate with Erik the gorilla somehow. And it's like this weird language. And the dudes are fighting with the detective saying that the accent sounded Italian. No, it sounded, the guy's like, no, it sounded the German. And no,
German.
it sounded Dutch. No. And they start talking. It's such an odd scene. And the detective's like, all 3 of you are fucking idiots. Like, what are you talking about? It's a funny scene, but I can't tell if it was supposed to be funny or not. I think
Right.
it was supposed to be. Like Paul, his character, comedy relief. You can just tell. But was this scene supposed to be dramatic or funny? I was not
maybe a little
quite-
bit of both.
Yeah,
yeah. It's hard to tell. I know I got comedic relief from it, but it also kind of set the tone for Bela's or Dr. Miracle, I guess, because he's supposed to be this very strange, mysterious, weird dude.
Yeah.
And I mean that does kind of set the tone for him a little bit, but it's also funny to see these three
bickering
gentlemen,
over.
Yeah. Yep.
The Italian guy's my favorite. He's like, no, I come from Italy. I know this is what he sounds. This is what Italian sounds like. Italian sounds like my.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. But then if you think about it, 1932, this is, I guess that's what people thought of Italians, Germans, and Dutch. He's a Dutchman.
Right, yeah.
He's speaking Dutch. Just a interesting scene. It just kind of the dialogue between the three men. Because like these men only show up in that scene and that's it. They don't come up again.
That's it. You don't see
They're
him
just
ever again.
part of the townspeople.
I am Italian. I speak Italian. Io parlo italiano. When I ran up the stair with the other, I heard the voice. It's not Italian, no. Excellenza, it was Danish.
You speak Danish?
No,
Were you ever in Denmark?
no.
How do you know it was Danish?
My intuition.
So some cons. Anything pro-conish in the movie? What are the pros and the cons to you when it comes to this movie?
I guess we'll start with the cons.
Okay.
I think the biggest one, and like I said, it's really not that big of a con because I love giggling at stuff. It's just the transitioning from the many faces of Erik.
Yes.
That just there had to have been, I said, probably 3 different head sculpts or something, and then you have the chimpanzee and then the actual gorilla, and it's like they couldn't have just used one. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure at least one person who wasn't afraid of gorillas at that point in time was like, wait a minute, what the fuck's going on with Erik over there?
Yeah. I was trying, like, I don't know where they were. And again, I'm right there with you. It's like, it's hard to call that a con just because I was so amused by it.
It was very amusing.
So I don't know, 1932, how available were gorillas to people?
Right.
I'm assuming they just couldn't get their hands on a gorilla. And
That's what I'm thinking
what's
too.
closer? A chimpanzee.
Yeah.
I guess that's the only reason why they did that. They just couldn't get a gorilla. But even for me, I wouldn't call that 100% a con because
Not
I
a
was
con. Yeah, it's kind of got some gray area.
I enjoyed it. I'll be honest, even on my end, there's really not. I don't have many. This is such a short movie.
It is. Yeah.
Don't have many cons.
I got 2 other ones.
Yeah. What are the
I'll
other two? Let's
say
hear yours.
I did feel like for such a small movie, it did kind of take a little bit to get going. It was kind of a slow burner at first, but once it starts, once the big moment's out there and you know what's going on, it's all downhill from there. It's crazy. There isn't very much music. I don't think there's really any music at all. That's still kind of in that era of like no music to kind of help a movie along, I guess. And we're familiar with that already with Dracula and with Frankenstein. And other than that, I didn't really have, like you said, there's not much bad to say about this movie. It's all it's a pretty interesting movie. It's something that's going to keep our attention. It kept my attention the whole way through.
Yeah, the music thing I think is eventually going to play, as we continue going through. I think eventually there will be a movie. This is the first movie in the Universal Monsters to have a score. They just always come off as quiet, but I think that's just our brain so used to
stuff.
score being so vital to movies.
Oh yeah.
That at one point that wasn't a thing. It was, it was just they made the movie and score was not something people thought of. I'm sure in 1932 when someone was watching this, they weren't like, I'm giving this one less star because it has no music, because that wasn't a thing back in the day. Yeah. For me, I'd say this. This is kind of like my overall wrap up of Murders in the Rue Morgue. I could see someone watching this movie and hating it. Like when comparing it to Frankenstein and Dracula, and I wouldn't give them that much shit for it because it's just a gorilla. There's no like,
Sure.
there's no iconic monster there, you know.
Right,
and
yeah.
when most people think of iconic gorillas, King Kong is gonna
King
always
Kong's
be.
already, he's the king, man.
That's why he's King Kong. He's the king,
Yeah.
like you said. So there's really no comparing him to Kong because there's only one there's only one giant cool ape, and then I think that maybe would have benefited making. And that con just came into me talking now. Maybe making Erik bigger, a little different from a normal gorilla, even though I know it's a guy in a suit, but still, maybe make him larger, even though the actor, like I said earlier, was short, but differentiate him from a normal gorilla. Make him more intimidating. There was really nothing intimidating about Erik, I'd say.
Right.
He's just sort of a monkey. He's a normal monkey that likes bonnets and wants to bang Camille. But I think Bela Lugosi as Dr. Miracle, I was about to say Miracle, it's a solid performance. I really like Pierre. I think as the hero, the protagonist of the film, the fiance who wants to save his soon to be wife, he's really likable. He is. You believe he wants to help her, save her, and he's desperate to save his lady. He wants to be the hero at the end, and you need that in this movie. When comparing the last film, I forget the character's name, but the guy in Frankenstein who's like the hero, he sucked. I remember us both saying like he kind of was pointless in the movie. That the stud guy, he was kind of a hero of that movie, but he was kind of dull. Where Pierre in this, comparing the two, Pierre is much better. I think the character's written a lot better. And I just think for the story they're trying to tell, there are some twists and turns. I love Erik the gorilla turning on Miracle. I do like the confrontation with Pierre at the end, shooting him. And at the end, it was just like this misunderstood monkey, that was kind of being tortured, at the very end. And I think that, we kind of brushed over it, but that scene where Bela Lugosi is explaining to the crowd that, he was taken away from his family and from the wild and from Africa, and he just wants to go back and he feels lonely. That's kind of the overall arc of Erik the gorilla. That's what he wanted. He wanted companionship. So when you look at that and you look at the story this movie's trying to tell you, it all makes sense. And I think it's at least worth one watch. I can maybe this is not something you're going to revisit during the Halloween season. This movie does not have Halloween vibes at all compared to Frankenstein and Dracula. It's more in line with like science fiction and like, an animal gone awry or gone wild. Monkeys gone wild.
Yeah, you can watch this movie any time of the year, really. I would not watch it during Halloween.
No.
It does, like you said, there's no Halloween vibes.
No.
You could watch it now.
Yeah, I'd recommend checking it out. Like I said, one watch, give it a chance. Keep in mind this movie was released in 1932, backwards, 1932, and gorillas were scary at the time. Maybe not so much now, but back in those days, the most frightening thing you'd ever see is Erik the gorilla.
My life is consecrated to great experiment. I tell you, I will prove your kinship with the ape.
So that was 1932's Murders in the Rue Morgue. Next up, we're covering The Mummy, Grimy, a big one.
Or should we say Unwrapping the Mummy?
Yes, you're right. We'll be unwrapping The Mummy. Very good there, Grimy. Where can people find you and a Leftover Pizza podcast?
So you can find us over on Instagram or on Twitter. Just type in Leftover Pizza. I'm sure it'll pop up. You can also find us on Facebook, or you can listen to us wherever you catch your podcasts.
And be sure to subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or X, TikTok, at Haunted Hangover. Head over to hauntedhangover.com for links to everything, including our Patreon page, where you can get early access to episodes and bonus content. rate and review us. That'd be greatly appreciated. And as always, remember, the best cure for a hangover is
More booze.
catch you guys later. Let's pour one out for our boy, Erik the Gorilla.
Dicks out for Harambe.